How would you describe this world? I wonder whether we could describe it as a world of infectious disease. Perhaps that's a little bit grim, but that's our experience of this world, isn't it? Of infectious disease, particularly at this time with COVID-19 and the coronavirus spreading across the globe, taking many thousands of lives, wreaking havoc wherever it goes. But we live in a world of infectious disease, and outside of COVID-19, there's infections all the time of different sorts, whether it's other great deadly diseases like malaria that has ravaged for many years, many nations, and taken thousands of lives, or diseases, seasonal flu, which mutates and changes year on year and comes back in different forms, and we can't seem to quite get rid of it. Or less deadly, but nevertheless prevalent issues like sickness and diarrhea bugs, which seem to spread through communities and from one community to the next at various points. Not very deadly, but nevertheless an infectious bug, disease going around. And the nature of infections and infectious diseases is that it spreads from the clean to the unclean. The infected, the diseased, the sick, to the healthy and the clean. And the reason for our social distancing now is because we want to keep those who are sick away from those who are healthy. We want to make sure that the disease doesn't have an opportunity to spread. Because when you put the clean with the unclean, what happens? Well, the clean becomes unclean as well. Things contaminate and defile that which is clean. And what does this have to do with the Bible and with Jesus? One of the great books of the Bible is the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is one of the earliest books of the Bible written by Moses, quite early on in the Bible. And it's a book of rules and regulations, of laws surrounding the worshipping life of God's people. And one of the themes that comes up again and again in the book of Leviticus and throughout the rest of the Bible is that of the clean and the unclean. The clean and unclean. And so often people dismiss this teaching as some out-of-date, unscientific understandings of hygiene rules and of cooking and dealing with food and handling things like that in a way that tries to keep people safe. And so these laws and these words and this teaching is dismissed. But actually, when you stop and really look at the book of Leviticus and you look at the clean and unclean in the Bible, what we find is that it's God has given us a way to see and to understand the theological framework, the underpinnings of this world. That it's not really about food hygiene laws at all. It's showing us and teaching us, giving us a way to understand what is going on in the deepest fabrics of the reality of this world. So what is going on with the clean and the unclean? The clean is about God's creation, the good creation that God made, a place without death, without suffering, without bloodshed. And the unclean is all to do with those things which remind us of the fallen nature of this world. The unclean things are those things which are particularly characterized by and linked with the suffering, the hurts and the pain, the bloodshed of this world. Certain animals which are unclean are those which hunt and which kill other animals. The things which are touched by mold, those things are unclean because they remind us of the decay and the brokenness of this world, the death that so pervades. All the uncleanliness around bodily discharges and bloodshed is about suffering and death. Those things are unclean. They're a part of this fallen creation. They're not a part of God's original creation, untouched by death, and is not a part of God's future creation, the new heavens, the new earth, when the world is restored. The unclean things will not be found there in the original unfallen creation. There was no death, there was no predation, there was no pain or suffering, there was no bloodshed or disease, there's no sorrow in childbirth, there's no decay. And so those things are all unclean things. What's the link with infectious diseases? Well, just like physical diseases spread, so this spiritual uncleanliness is something which spreads. And so within all these laws, there's talk of how the unclean things, when they come in contact with the clean things, they too are made unclean. The clean things are made unclean when they come into contact with that which is unclean. It's not unlike our experience of infectious disease. When those infected, when those who are ill come in contact with, when they're at their infectious period, then they can spread their germs and the disease to those who are previously healthy and well. The clean cannot come in contact with the unclean until we come to Jesus. There's this great little story at the beginning of Matthew chapter 8 where Jesus comes across a man with leprosy. The thing with leprosy is that it ticks multiple boxes. It's physically infectious. The people at the time with leprosy and with similar skin diseases were exiled, so to speak, were sent away from healthy humanity because of the worry that their physical illness might spread to the healthy. But it's not just leprosy as a physical illness, but leprosy was in the category of spiritually unclean. And those with skin diseases of the sort of leprosy were to be kept away from the unclean. So this man with leprosy that Jesus meets in Matthew chapter 8 is both physically and spiritually unclean. You must stay away from him at all costs if you value your own cleanliness at all. And this man with leprosy comes and kneels before Jesus and he says, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And up until this point in the story, we already know, of course, Jesus can do miraculous things. Of course, he can heal. But he does something more surprising even than healing him. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. At that moment, all the alarm bells should be ringing. We should be thinking, well, wait a second, Jesus, you can't do that. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Be clean. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Go back to the Levitical law. Think about the clean and the unclean. Go make a sacrifice, showing, giving testimony to them that you have been made clean. And somehow this done by Jesus, who touches the unclean. You see, there's something about Jesus in his divine, perfectly pure self that he uniquely is able, as one who is clean, more than that, as one who is holy, to touch that which is unclean. And rather than himself being defiled, being contaminated, rather than him becoming sick and taking on the uncleanliness, he is able to impart purity and health, to restore and to make clean that which is unclean. It teaches us, I think, how helpless and how frail we are. For all our desires to help others, for all our desires to stay clean, actually we are completely and utterly unclean as human race. We are inflicted with a deadly spiritual disease that is death. And there's really nothing we can do about it. But Jesus is able to come along the one who is so full of life, the Holy One. He comes and he is able to restore and to give life. The leper's words to Jesus were, Lord, if you are willing, make me clean. And so I wonder whether you're aware of your own frailty and in different ways your own uncleanness, whether it's physical or spiritual. You know perhaps that there is a sickness in your heart, that you live a life of darkness, of death. You are deeply hurt by others, and you have caused hurt to others. We are characterized not by a physical infectious disease, but by that spiritual sickness of sin and death. Well, the invitation of Jesus is to go to him, to say, Jesus, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And the promise of Jesus is that he will reach out his hand and he can touch you. He can touch me. And he can make our hearts clean. Let's go to Jesus day by day and let's find life and health in him. Not mere physical health, only one day to die, but that spiritual health that leads to life everlasting, the life of the clean, pure, undefiled creation that God once created and one day will remake in this world. And we're invited to it, to share in that clean, pure, holy place in the presence of Jesus.